What's up, everybody? Welcome back for another video. As you can see, we got the fossil up in the air, up on the jack stands, and that means that we are working on something underneath the truck. We're going to be doing another winter upgrade, and really I can't even call this an upgrade because this is more of an update or something that's mandatory that we have to do. We have to fix things that are bent. So let's jump into that and see what we're working on today. One of these days, I'm going to get me a set of projects. If you've been following along over on the community side of things on the channel here, you see that I post some behind-the-scenes stuff and, some, hey, this is what the next video is going to be about. And you saw that we have a bent transmission crossmember. And well, I'm going to get into why that's bent and all that stuff a little bit later in the video. But in order to do that, we need to get this old one out so we can start building a new one. You would think that as many times as I have done this, that I would know exactly which tools I need to use and exactly what not to do. But the front drive shaft in this thing is a little bit too long, so I have to move the transfer case back a little bit to get it out. And when I do that, I make a nice, fun mistake that I normally don't make. Well, we had a blooper there. As you can see, first time wearing the fluid. Go me. If you've ever pulled the transfer case out of your 47-48 equipped vehicle without draining the transmission fluid, you know that makes a mess. I know this and still made this mistake. So we've got the transmission crossmember out of the race truck here because, as you can tell, it's pretty obvious that this thing is bent. This is not the best design. This is actually the very first thing that I ever fabricated for the truck when I went down the journey of turning it into a race truck. And I just didn't know nearly as much as I knew now. This is just an 1.25 inch piece of mild steel. It's actually 120 wall. And because it's a small diameter and it has so much force, it's not really the weight of the transmission and the transfer case and everything that did this. It's more so the force of the four-link and how it's pushing and pulling on everything. That is why this thing got bent. So, as cool as this looked, and I was proud of it at the time, it's not the best design. We're going to come up with something a lot stronger, and I think it'll actually end up being a little bit lighter or end up weighing the same just because we're going to do chromoly, and that will be a thinner wall tubing. The other thing that's pretty stupid about this is you can't take the crossmember out unless the front drive shaft is out of it. I don't know necessarily why you would want to pull the crossmember and not the drive shaft, but in this particular scenario, it was a pain. So we're going to address all that stuff. I was also using there's actually 4 mounting bolts on a 47 or a 48, and I was using the front 2 closer to the pan. And this time I'm going to use the rear 2 closer to the transfer case to support the weight of the transfer case and the driveline better. Basically do it how I did Newman's truck. So I'm going to get to work, start making this new crossmember for this thing, and we'll see what it looks like when we get her all finished up. So I'm making this new crossmember per SFI specs of a 25-4 roll cage, and we'll get into why I'm doing that a little bit later in the video. But because you have to abide by certain rules to do a 25-4 cage, you have to build the transmission crossmember in a certain way. Basically, we have to have tabs that the bolts hold the transmission crossmember bolt through. So I am working on some tab plates to mount to the frame. Now, you could just take these tabs that you see laying on the table there and weld them directly to the frame rail if you were building your truck. But since my stuff's already painted, I don't want to go and burn up the paint. So I am making some little brackets for these tabs to be welded to, so that way this will bolt to the frame rail and will still be 25-4 compliant with that. So as you saw there, I was drilling the holes in these plates first before I cut it out. And the reason I do that is because it makes it way easier to drill the holes before you do any of the cutting if you were to cut it out first and then drill the holes. It just makes it a lot harder to hold on to the part and a lot less stable. So make your life easier if you're fabricating stuff, and if you have to drill holes before you're cutting something out of flat plate, drill the holes first. Here you can get a lot better idea of what I'm talking about doing here. Those two tabs, you see how the bolt goes through that? There will be a sleeve, a tube sleeve in the transmission cross member, and that bolt will pass through that. That'll actually be what mounts it. And I'm using these little tab pieces here welded to that flat plate, so that way I can bolt that plate to the frame rail. Now you'll see when I'm welding this that I weld a little bit at a time, and then I stop, I spin it around, weld the other side, go to the other bracket, and I flip back and forth like that. And the reason I do that is because I don't want to weld this all in one shot and risk pulling up the ends of the metal. It is 3/16 material, but with putting a lot of heat to it when you're welding, it can cause it to warp, and I want to keep all this stuff nice and flat so it bolts in nice, keep everything true. So I just like to weld a little bit at a time and stop so I can really control the heat. So now that we've got our pieces here that are going to bolt to the frame all finished up, it makes a lot more sense for what we're doing here. So those pieces will get bolted to the inside of the frame rail, just like how this original cross member used to bolt to the inside of the frame rail. And then this tube we will sleeve with a piece of 1/2-inch tubing here, 1/2-inch ID, 5/8 OD. And that tube will have a hole drilled in here. That tube will go through there, it'll get welded through, and then this will bolt into these mounts that are bolted to the frame rail. And this is what is considered a 25/4 or a 25/5 cross member. To get that certification, you have to do the cross member like this. So if we ever decide to upgrade the roll cage in the future, if we ever end up running faster than 530, then we can upgrade it to a 25/4 and not have to change our cross member here. I have a piece of 1 5/8 tubing. This is chromoly 083 wall. This is actually like a bin for like a ladder bar car. So this would have had, you know, equally as much tubing over here. And this is going to be my new start of the drive shaft, front drive shaft clearance and safety loop. We've got a safety loop over there that will pin into this once we get it all said and done. And so not only will this be 25/4 compliant at this point, we will also be able to pull the cross member out without having to pull the front drive shaft out if ever we need to. So now I'm going to get these bolted into the frame rails, get this tube up under the truck, and from this point we're going to have to start doing our tacking and some of our welding on the truck over there to make sure that everything lines up exactly how it should. And then always when you're welding on a truck, make sure you disconnect the battery so you don't end up frying anything. All right, got the main tube of the cross member in. You can see got the little tab pieces, I don't know, whatever we're going to call those, that the tube sleeve and the cross member bolts to. Got those bolted into the frame on each side. Got the cross member squared up in there. So now the next thing that we need to do is we need to make a mount to go from the back mount on the transmission here to the cross member. So if you can see that there, it's a little bit of a distance back away from the center of the cross member. So we're going to do a little 90-degree 1 5/8 tube off to that, make a little plate and bolt this thing on here, and then the cross member will basically be done aside from fully welding everything. So I'm going to get started making this plate, and then we'll get a tube notched and made, put in here, get it all tacked up on the truck so we know it's exactly where it needs to go, and then final weld it all out. Here I'm making that little flat piece that is going to bolt to the transmission itself. And we're going to do this in the exact same fashion that we did the other flat pieces. Drill the holes first and then cut it. Pretty straightforward on this one. Then once I get this piece cut out, we'll take it over to the truck, check the fitment, make sure that everything bolts up good, and then we'll be ready to start making that little 90-degree piece that is going to tack between this and the cross member. giving it the old "you got it, champ" seal of approval. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever had to tack anything that's in a hard, awkward position by yourself, but it is hard to do, especially with chromoly, because it doesn't want to fusion weld. So what I'll usually do is I'll get it where I want it, and then I'll take the TIG welder, and I'll act like I'm trying to fusion weld it, and that'll give me a little spot where I can know that I can weld it on there. And then once I do that, I'll take a piece of filler rod and I'll just put a little bead of filler on there. And then that way it gives me some filler rod there to be able to tack it on. So got it all tacked up. Before I go jumping into this thing, welding it fully, you can see I tacked it in several more spots just to make sure everything stays put and doesn't move. I'm going to do this just like I did those flat plates. I'm going to weld a little bit, stop, rotate it, go to a different spot, weld a little bit, and just continue to go back and forth on that so I can make sure that nothing moves and everything stays true to where I wanted it. So now that the cross members all final welded out, next thing to do will be to add this drive shaft safety loop. NHRA rule, any drive shaft must have containment on both ends, so we need to add a safety loop for the front drive shaft on the cross member to be compliant. We're going to do a pin-on type safety loop here, so that way it's super easy to remove. So you can take the cross member in and out without having to mess with the safety loop, just making life a little bit easier. So that'll be the next thing we do, and as soon as we get that done, the cross member will be completely done. So we got the cross member all finished up here, and now for the fun part, for me at least. Now we get to weigh this thing and see where we did weight-wise. I am going to be okay with whatever it is, because it is what it is. This had to happen, and it is definitely stronger, but I'm thinking that it's going to be a wash. I don't think that the new cross member is going to be any lighter, but I also don't think that it's going to be any heavier than the old one here. Man, let's take a minute and just say, this new cross member looks a lot better than the old one. The old one's not terrible, it's not bad, but to me it's obvious that I did this 8 or 9 years ago. I can tell how much more that I've learned, and honestly that's one of my favorite parts of working on trucks, is being able to take the knowledge that I've learned along the way and incorporate it into new parts and new builds and new things for new people. So, let's get to weighing these things, see what they weigh. We are going to start with the old cross member first. Scale says 0. Let's see what this thing weighs. Let's see if I can make it lay on there. 7 pounds. Pretty good, not bad. That's about what I figured it would weigh. Couldn't see this one being any lighter than that. Kind of was in my mind thinking that this would end up being 8 or 9, but we're about to find out. £7 pounds. So exactly a wash. And I'm good with that. Anytime I can make something stronger, better, and it is not any heavier, that is absolutely a win. So that's going to conclude it for this video today, guys. We have a better cross member. We have a 25/4 spec cross member now, in case we ever decide to update the cage in the future. And anytime you can not add any more weight to it, it is a win. So Like always, guys, thanks for watching. I appreciate it. If you're new here, click that subscribe button, share these videos with your friends, hit the like button on these videos. Really helps me get the content out there to more people. Thanks, guys. See you next time.